All right, welcome back to the True Potential Women's Summit. We have an amazing guest today. Her name is Elsbeth Meuth, and she is an intimacy and relationship expert, helping women be empowered in tapping into their feminine essence. Thank you, Elsbeth, for being here today. So excited to have you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about the feminine essence. Can you highlight what that is? And then we'll go deeper with the follow up
Yes.
questions.
Yes, great question because, often we may hear like the feminine power but what's feminine essence? Because it's a little bit more, it may be eluding us what that is. So, feminine essence has something to do with being connected to my feminine, that of course resides in my heart, in my body, and also in my life force energy center. And I will speak a little bit more about that later. So, I see it like a trifold of stations in my being. So there's the sexual being, there's the emotional being, and then there's the spiritual being. And so most of us are, when we grow up, we become more compartmentalized. So we are more in our head, or some of us are more in our heart in the sense of like we lose our heart. Um, and some of us are either, disconnected from our creative sexual place, or perhaps we are oversexed, or whatever it may be. And those are often reactions to what we have learned when we were young. So, why I speak about feminine essence has to do with reconnecting with ourselves where we become integrated so that my sexual, emotional, and spiritual self really dance and move with each other in a flow, because that is when we feel more aligned, where we feel whole, where we feel vital, connected with ourselves.
Mm,
So that creative center, I want to emphasize today a little bit more because that's usually the center that we are at least familiar with in like a conscious way.
mm.
Yeah,
Around the femininity. Around
exactly,
femininity. Now,
exactly.
I'm curious because a lot of times as women and the clients that I work with, I notice this common theme that as women, and it could be pre their 20s and 30s, but I primarily work with women in their 30s and 40s and young adulthood. But they talk about feeling as though they're feeling a little bit lost or disconnected or a sense of their identity feeling kind of uncertain and feeling a level of self doubt that maybe they felt self confident to a certain degree, but then somewhere along the way they feel a little bit more lost or disconnected. Can you explain a little bit about that experience and how they've disconnected maybe from the feminine, if that is in fact true, and how to get realigned so that they really feel fully whole and connected to their essence again and plugged in, so to speak?
Yes, I love the question because I suffered under that myself when I was,
Ah,
age. I'm a little older now.
right, right.
But having moved through it, that sense of perhaps lostness or lack of confidence, or, being quite successful in one arena in our life,
Yes,
but
exactly.
missing out either on the personal or familial or relational uh, level, just something has not come together yet. Now, we are all blessed, having grown up and growing up in this age where there's so much possibility for women. When we think of our grandmothers or grandmothers, I mean, they were at home, they couldn't vote, and I mean, just inconceivable. And now we, have full access to participating in the marketplace. Of course, all of us have been working on that. And so, what many of us have developed is our masculine side. So if we
Exactly.
look at our being, there is, we could call it the yin yang side or the feminine masculine side. Now, that shows up in every human being, both women and men. However, given that most women have more estrogen than testosterone, so the feminine is actually, more emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
However, depending on our behaviors, on our decisions we may have made,
Mm-hmm.
we may tend more towards the masculine in order to achieve something. So, for example, for me, it was when I was young. I mean, I probably was a teenager when I made that decision. It was not like this conscious decision, but that nanosecond decision that I wanted to be like a man. And I was not a tomboy or so. But what showed up in my life was that my mother, I'm one of 10 children. And so my mother was, at home taking care of the children. And I always felt my father had the last word. And I hated that, so I wanted to become like my dad.
Which interestingly, you probably didn't want to become like your dad. You wanted probably the power or the privilege or the opportunities or the freedom and that you wanted, and that just association was with everything that was manhood. Am I
Yes,
right?
totally. I mean,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, of course, I didn't want to look like him or become like him,
Of course not.
but the characteristics, yes.
And what
And
the value, like what you
yes,
receive by being
yeah,
in that space.
yeah.
Right.
And it truly had to do with power,
Right.
you know? Um, and so I was fighting for that for a long, long time until I noticed that that was my driver. And
Mm.
what I had lost was the feminine side. Now, I always looked feminine. I always was great with men flirting. And,
Right.
it was not like, no, that was very present. It was like an external femininity that was present. But internally, I
Mm.
was like fighting. I became competitive, which is great. I mean, not to throw this out with the bathwater, but the balance was not there.
Mm.
So for me, it was really tapping into the feminine self, which has to do with allowing my feelings, being willing to feel my feelings, to, also the vulnerable side, and to rediscover the strength of the feminine that is not outward, but that's more inward. And it's in the balance of the feminine and masculine that we actually arrive at that sense of confidence that you, Andrea, spoke a little bit earlier about. And of course, that it can be learned or relearned through practices, through tapping into ourselves. It usually, takes a little time, doesn't have to take a long time, but just like with any practice, it wants to be embodied. So, yeah. Um,
So I'm curious because the masculine energy is very much driven, very linear, tangible, planning, organized. And I know that the feminine is a much more receiving, allowing, surrendering. You don't see the results right away kind of way of utilizing that. So, with somebody, a woman that is very ambitious, how can she be patient as she sits back in to her feminine? Can you give us some tools and strategies for a woman to trust that even though she's not seeing the tangible results, that actually the benefit of taking a step back, surrendering and receiving, like what can she expect if she's willing to be patient and like trust the feminine, her feminine essence more?
yeah. So that the word trust, of course, has a lot to do with this. And what I would like to do is actually just guide a short practice in which we can tap into that connected, intimate, feminine place within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that, then also everybody who is listening today or watching, you can leave with something tangible. So it's the listening to the inner self versus the listening to the outer self. Just as you described it, the masculine is driving outward, looking for results, like external results. And the feminine, when we open up to it, when we open up to our trusting, receiving self, which for some women that may be a real challenge, because that may be something they, when they were kids, it was betrayed, or they felt it was betrayed. So who would want to experience that again? However, where we want to take it is that we can generate this within ourselves. So let's do the practice. Yeah?
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Okay. So if you could sit, everybody sit just comfortably yet erect. And if you could place your right hand on your belly, around the belly button. And when you are ready, exhale all air like this. Now take a deep breath in through the nose. Follow it down into the lungs, further down, extending the diaphragm into the belly. And on the exhalation, follow the breath back up and out through your nostrils again. Now let's do this again. Deep breath in through the nose, down into the lungs, diaphragm, into the belly, extending the belly into the hand. And on the exhalation, sending the breath back up and out of the nostrils again. And again, breathing in through the nose, all the way down into the belly, extending the belly like a big balloon into the hand. On the exhalation, sending the breath back up and out of the nostrils again. Continue in this breathing pattern, always following the path of the breath. Beautiful. And while you breathe in and out like that, just notice if any thought comes in, like, when is this going to be over? Or what are we doing here? Or, oh, this feels great. Whatever it may be for you, just notice the thought while you continue breathing into the belly. And then let the thought go. Now bring your awareness to the belly rising on the inhale and to the falling on the exhale. Just stay with this for one more breath. Beautiful. And then take a moment and notice how you're feeling right now, how your body is feeling. Beautiful. And then please come back. And Andrea, could you just share out loud how you are feeling now after the practice?
I think initially there was kind of this forward momentum and then just kind of this like gearing down, almost like a downshift, like a down gear of just breathing and being still, noticing, the activity of the mind, and then also just returning back to the breath and then just kind of being in this peaceful place, and this centeredness and grounding, almost like returning back to a center place. That was my experience.
Beautiful. So we could also liken this to what you mentioned earlier, coming into that, coming into ourselves as a place of confidence, of power, not exerting power, but being power, which is a very different state of being. It's like I'm myself and I'm breathing, and thank you. So I want to say a little bit more about this practice, so to get also the background why this is relevant. Sure. So when we breathe into the belly, what happens is the parasympathetic nervous system gets activated. Usually when we breathe automatically, it's built into us. We are wired for it, so that we don't die on the spot.
Right. It's almost, I refer to it as the brakes of the car, the
Yes,
parasympathetic versus the sympathetic, which is very active.
yes, which is more up in the chest.
Yes.
And it also even, like when I'm angry, I breathe more up here. I'm outside of myself. When we breathe down into the belly, then that nervous system that actually regulates our heartbeat, our blood flow, everything that we are not aware of, that kicks in and that releases endorphins and serotonin and melatonin, so all the feel good hormones. And that allows us to become quieter, calmer. And then in that place of calmness, or I like to call it stillness, you called it peace, that is where connectedness with the within arises, and intimacy. I can only be intimately connected, emotionally intimately, or also sexually intimately, if I'm connected with myself. And I always say, if I'm not connected intimately with myself, how can I connect intimately with my beloved or with my child? Because it's like I'm, ooh,
Right.
versus,
A lot of times, some of the women that I work with, they talk about when they're intimate in sex, that their mind is very active, especially if they have children. They're thinking, oh, our kids are next, in the next room, or we got to do this, or I have to do that. And I think being able to use this breath to center and to just actually be in the present moment and
yeah,
letting the mind quiet will allow women to be more, one, in their feminine, two, more intimate with themselves and others, and to actually be in the present moment and really enjoy the present of the present more
yes,
fully.
yes, which is the only moment where we actually feel and experience. Even if I'm over in the other room with the kid, it's still me here.
Right.
So also thanks for mentioning this, that in a sexual context, that not being present, because that is also what we do a lot in our work here at Tantra Nova, working both with women individually and then also in couplehood, how we can use this breath that we just did when we are in our aroused self,
Right.
so that we actually move that wonderful energy up, all the way up into our third eye or into our heart. I can use it, to open my throat, to become self-expressed, and not only in the bedroom, but, in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So this energy, that life force energy that is sexual in nature, when we connect with that in that way, as we connected in the belly breath, whole new ways of feeling, of experiencing, also orgasmically experiencing, can open up. And so that leads me back to that feminine essence, because it has something to do with our orgasmic self.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't always have to be the wild big orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be like the breeze on my skin, or just like I feel that, tender feeling in my sexual center. By the way, Andrea, in our work, we call the sexual center of a woman yoni,
Mm-hmm.
Yoni, and yoni means sacred space. I love this so much because it speaks to my feminine essence, versus like this is a portal for someone else to,
Mm-hmm.
receive pleasure. And that's great too, of course. But it's like my sacred space that I honor, revere, respect, cherish. And just imagine if all of us would, as women, would have grown up as we were teenagers, being introduced to our sexual center as a sacred space. Wow, that probably would have, put us on a different trajectory
Mm-hmm.
around our sexual self, because it's the honoring. And along with that, we honor our sexual self, that life force. It's life force. So if I am constricted, restricted, so if that is suppressed, perhaps not because of me, but the cultural thing, then my life force is also restricted. And that has something to do with the feminine essence. So I'm at
Right.
home with my yoni, my sacred space. I'm home with my heart space, which we haven't tapped into much today. And then, of course, our spiritual and conscious self.
Mm. Can
So,
I ask a question? A question is coming to mind because obviously we as women are relational creatures. We're very collaborative and connected. We want connection and we want relationships. And so I would imagine that something that happens to women, especially whether it be in the workplace or in a relationship, that if they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed or insecure or this threat of disconnection, if I actually show up fully or if I actually speak my truth, they're in the back burner is I might lose relationship or I might be rejected or I might be shamed or so how does a woman in that space, because I think that that's really that moment where we could potentially self-abandon from our power to reach for the approval of others and disconnect from the yoni power, from our power. Does that
mhm,
make sense what I'm asking? And how we can
totally.
stay connected with that, even in the face of fear, even in the face of, real or perceived threat of disconnection? Because
Mhm,
that's really where I think the majority of women on the planet disconnect from themselves and
mhm.
then feel that lost feeling along the way over time.
Yeah. Wow. That's really great. So I would locate this actually in the heart
Mm.
to, to consult my heart center. Now, the heart is connected in terms of frequency or energy. It's connected with love, with compassion. And that's always first and foremost for ourselves. And given just what you said, we are relationally oriented. And so it's like that love exchange, that is like what we are looking for. It's more an automatic reaction than by design, like conscious design. However, we can build it more as a conscious design. And what I have found both for myself and then working with hundreds and hundreds of women is to actually connect with loving herself. Now, that is like often a kind of a construct. What does that mean? Because it only comes to life if it's an experience, if it's embodied. And why that may really take some work to come to has to do with that we were so oriented towards the outside when we were like 2 years old, 5 years old, to, you know,
15, 20, 25, 30.
right, right. But that is where it originated, that
Right.
I'm looking for love outside. So
Mm-hmm.
when my dad didn't come home one day, I was 5 years old, and he was every day he came home at a certain time, he played with me, and
Mm-hmm.
one night he didn't come home.
Right.
I had no clue what had happened, but it was like, wow, he doesn't want to be with me anymore. He doesn't love me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps he had an accident or, it
Mm.
just had nothing to do with me. But this being oriented towards
The
our
external.
parents,
Mm-hmm.
usually, or someone who takes care of us. And then that really just continues into our adult life. And there comes a moment when there is usually an opportunity for each of us where we can either stay on that trajectory looking for love outside, which means approval,
Approval. Right.
acknowledgement, or learning to connect with the love within, which always has been there because otherwise we wouldn't know the experience of love if
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't there already,
Right.
but we located it outside. So then back to that, how do I show up at work or at the office, or um, what I find that can be really helpful when listening to my heart. Like, what does my heart want? Like, what's my truth? And no matter what anybody else thinks, let me just share this. Now, that may take some courage, that may take some practice, but that connecting, even when we used to have a youth program, and when we came to, how to be with their sexual selves, the 15 to 18-year-olds, Freddie took the boys and taught them certain practices to channel their sexual energy. I took the girls. I didn't talk much about the sexual. I talked about listening to their heart, what they want. Instead of just having sex because they like a boy and they didn't want to lose him, but they are not really ready for sex. I mean, it's like
It sounds like
this.
tapping into their intuition. You are helping them hone
Yes,
into their intuition and
yes,
their right
yeah,
to be able to be intentional.
yes. And that is what I want to suggest to start cultivating, no matter if you're in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s. And it's still for me a place to go to when I'm confused, when I feel nobody's hearing me or listening, like, what's there for me?
Right. And I think knowing that it's really an evolution, it's something you continually practice and return back to. It's not like a you cross a finish line like I've arrived.
Yes,
It's a constant returning back to yourself at those crosswords, for lack of a better term, those crosswords of vulnerability.
yes,
Am I going to have courage and be vulnerable and have my own back, even though,
yes,
right, in that fear mode of being kicked out of the tribe, so to speak?
yes,
Or
yes,
am I going to stand in that and maybe be open to a new tribe that will honor me the way that I'm honoring myself? Or will I self abandon to fit in or
yeah,
acquiesce or go along? And right. So I think we constantly have to tap into our intuition so that when those crosswords come our way, we have developed that discipline and that practice to really take a step back and listen. That's
yes,
that's what I tend to guide people to do, because
yes,
that helps them anchor in to what is yummy or yucky. you know?
yeah, yeah. And this is so great what you're bringing here because um, often intuition is associated with this part of ourselves, but it actually goes down into the heart center. And the heart center is really the center that reconciles our upper self with our lower selves.
Mm-hmm.
So like the physical, sexual power self, and then the speaking and the intuitive and the consciousness self. And so connecting with the heart self is, yes, as you say, tapping into a knowingness, that intuitive knowingness. And what I just like, what's showing up for me is out of your speaking, which is that it gets me out of the head. Because if I try to get an answer from my head, mm, mm, mm,
We
usually that is
spin.
right, because I'd like to rationalize it. And also what I'm used to, what I'm familiar with, comes up. And often that is not where the answer resides. So, wow, great. Let's just everybody put your hands on your heart for a moment. Just take a deep breath in all the way into your heart. Feel your chest opening into the hands and then let it go. And again, take a deep breath in, filling your chest, and notice how the chest opens into the hands. And on the exhalation, take your hands off just 1 inch. Again, take one more breath, a deep breath into the chest, into your heart, and feel how your chest is connecting with your palms, not physically, but energetically, and then let the breath go. And then take your hands off and just notice how your heart, your chest is feeling. Now, what we just did, it's really a subtle thing. You may say, I don't feel a big difference. No, it's not a big difference. But it's more like, oops, yeah, I just feel a little bit more connected there. Or we could call it aware. So this is what I mean when I say the three-tiered connection of our sexual, of our yoni self, our heart self, and our spiritual self to have access to this. And that is where going back to a sense of confidence, a sense of being centered in myself, we can have these like guiding points within ourselves on a physical level so that we can connect with our internal self.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we can overcomplicate it, feeling
Mm,
as though still looking at the solution from the same place that the problem is, like from the, and not to say the masculine has wonderful aspects and components and things that we should embrace and celebrate. Um, Absolutely. But I think if we try to access the feminine through the masculine, then we're going to lose our way. We're going to still be driving. And
yes.
what you just described is that the keys are at home.
Right.
And we actually don't we have everything we need already. We just need to remember and pay attention and be present enough with it. And I think connecting with our body is where we reconnect.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's right here, and
Yes.
it doesn't have to take an eternity. We could do this, it's not like I need to get there and it'll take me an
Yeah.
hour that I need to be doing this. It could be like 15 seconds,
Yeah.
various
Yeah.
times throughout the day.
Yeah. And there's one other dimension I want to bring up,
Yes.
which has to do with that we may have blocks or constrictions in any of these places. And most of us have some constriction around our yoni center. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't have great sex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's for some women, yes, it may be that, they say, I can, or they come to us and say, I really want to feel orgasmic. But that is not so much what I'm talking about right now. It's more like that, uh, because of the vilification of the feminine sexual energy for millennia,
Mm-hmm.
where that energy hasn't, I still to this day, hasn't been celebrated. Unlike masculine sexual energy, which is like, lauded, the prowess, the playboy, um, for us women, it's very different. It was like, no, don't go there, only when you're
Taboo.
married. Yeah. And so when I'm married, whose energy is it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's my energy with or without a partner, you know? And so to cultivate that connection. And so there is a lot of, or could be, fear, guilt, shame, embarrassment. And that is not just coming from our own individual history. Yes, we have different
Generations,
stories.
centuries
Right,
that we've
right.
inherited that we actually have to peel away.
Right. And I'm so privileged, Andrea, to do this work with women so
Mm.
that they can come fully into their yoni power, and strength and lushness and and creative energy. It sets free creative energy that we can channel into our project pursuits. It's like a kind of transmutation at some point. But at first, we want to clear whatever may be there, more subtle or not so subtle, so that we can free ourselves and come to fuller or fullest aliveness and self expression.
Right, and our full vitality, I think, because
Yes,
if we have any blocks in any of these areas, it dims our life force in those areas, whether it be our heart, our intuition, or our yoni center. So
yes,
being able to liberate ourselves, whether through movement or through these breathing exercise or even self-love reminders and creating those new relationships with these aspects of our being, that and really detangling ourselves from what is societal or some of these things that were never mine that I just inherited, and being able to give them back and
yes,
and
yes,
really define what our sensuality, our intuition, our own femininity, because that can look very different for different women.
yes.
To really define what is our way is really important. So I thank you for shedding light on that and giving us some practical tools that women on the call can take with them and utilize so that they can really tap into their feminine essence. Because if we all do that, then our life force is brighter, and that actually is what the planet needs more of, is women to
Yeah.
be self-expressed and to be really vital and bright and in their confident truth. So
Yes, yes. It's so great that you just said that it shows up differently for each of us because we are different characters, we have different strengths, yeah. And so it's an internal integrating of the feminine and masculine, yin and yang. And, if again, back to this for a moment, like, because the masculine has been dominant in this world, we have been living in a hierarchical world
we've
for
learned to adapt.
millennia. So it's been like this, so we could, and the opportunity now also internally and in our couplehood, in our societal life, to actually come into that balance, where there is not one up and one is down. No, it's more like a figure eight,
Yes.
where, of course, one may be more leading at some moment and the other one may be more following. And then it goes like
It's a
this.
dance.
Right, right.
It's
Now,
not linear.
right. And we don't have role models for that because it just hasn't been around in history. So
Mm-hmm.
we are the,
Role models in
we
creation.
are developing it. Yes, yes. I mean, for me, it's a constant learning,
Right.
you know, because I see myself at times really having appropriated these masculine ways of being. I want it this way and this is how you do it. And you know, so just being as dominant as I don't wish to be dominated. And
Mm-hmm.
so just like, learning the dance of the feminine and masculine, first and foremost to come into our inner balance, because that is where I feel whole and complete and vital and alive. And then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, it trickles out.
Yes. And what's interesting too is that men have access to the feminine essence too. It's not an actual from a logical stand, what like this a black and white standpoint. It's really an essence and a way of being that men and women can tap into both.
Right, right.
And
And for men, it's so great when they are open to tapping into that dimension of themselves, because feeling their feelings beyond anger, that's a permissible emotion to have for men. And the only place where they may express their some other emotions is on the battlefield, or when they become really they hug each other and camaraderie, or in sports, where they touch each other's ass, and it's like that is where it's allowed, but in regular life. So
right.
for him to open himself to his
To
heart
be
and to
vulnerable and to be and that can be powerful, not considered a weakness. I think that's the biggest shift in consciousness that we're evolving into, for that to be required and necessary and not to be shamed for it.
yes, so that really opens up a man to be connected in his heart, and he doesn't lose his nuts,
Yes.
because this is such a fear also vis-a-vis them, vis-a-vis women, that and because if we are in heterosexual relationships, then we want our man to be grounded in himself, in his manhood. At times I really like when Freddie says, no, I'm not going to do this, very clear, and I can no longer mess with him.
Mm-hmm.
um, at the same time, when he just comes over, me sitting at my desk and being so engrossed in some project, my computer, and comes over and he places his hand on my heart center, which means let's breathe together for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And he reminds me, because I was a little bit more in my masculine at that moment.
And he was in his feminine of like
Right.
connection and
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I loved this conversation. I think that there were so many nuggets in this conversation that I think people will find great value to, and incorporate different practical tips and strategies in their day to day. So thank you, Elsbeth, so much for being on today's call on the
Yes.
summit. And I know you have a free gift offering. What is that, and how can people connect with you further?
Yes, I'm so delighted that I can give. everybody who is here today more of how you can bring this into your life. So it's a video download. It's called Awaken to Your Feminine Essence. And there you learn several practices how to connect with yourselves. With yourself. So please enjoy it. And I recommend to pick one of the practices and do that one every day, because just like with any other practice, it will seep into your awareness, your subconscious, and most importantly, into your nervous system. And then that's the place from where our reality starts, the way changes the way we experience it.
And that
So,
confidence, that true confidence
right,
and true
right.
power. Wonderful. Well, I will include the link so everyone will be able to access that. And thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.